Dear students, let us begin with the third part of the lesson on India emerging as a global power, in which we will learn about India's energy policy and India as a nuclear power. India's energy policy. India is one of the largest consumers of energy, consuming more than the other developing countries. India's traditional suppliers of energy resources have been the Middle East and Africa. In an attempt to widen its network of suppliers, India has sought partnerships in Latin America between the ONGC, Videsh and other oil companies in the region. India is also seeking to bring on board the countries of Central Asia, which are large depositories of natural resources and can help in sustaining India's growth and development. In an effort to ensure access to energy resources, India will need to continue its focus on the Middle East, which supplies 2/3 of their oil, and particularly countries like Iran. Iran is the fourth largest provider of oil after Saudi Arabia, Nigeria and Kuwait. In order to have supply of oil without interruption, India along with Iran had initiated the work on a proposed pipeline from Iran through Pakistan to India. It was alternatively termed as the Peace Pipeline. However, a number of impediments, including the tensions between India and Pakistan and Iran's strained relations with countries of the West over its nuclear program, made it impossible for such a pipeline to become a reality. In addition to the Gulf, India has expanded its search for energy resources beyond its immediate neighborhood into Africa and Latin America. For instance, in Africa and in Latin America, India has competed with China for bids where India was most often the loser. However, India and China have jointly proposed bids that have often been successful, like in the case in Sudan. The Sino-India secured agreements to access Sudan's oil reserves, invested in various sectors, actively mediated the Darfur conflict negotiations and extended humanitarian assistance to civilians. The other feasible source of energy that has tremendous potential is nuclear energy. However, India gets only 3% of its electricity generated from nuclear power compared to 30% in Japan and 78% in France. It wants to expand its nuclear energy production by 9% a year by 2050. This current low level of production was one of the driving factors behind the July 2005 civilian nuclear agreement between India and the United States. As soon as it is complete, it will ensure supply of fissile material to its civilian reactors, and new technologies will ensure their safety and efficiency. Another source of energy that could be harvested is hydroelectricity, but this will require a better coordination and cooperation from India's neighbors on sharing of river waters. Solar energy and wind energy are still in their nascent stages and are not yet considered as viable sources of India's need for energy. Securitization of energy is closely associated with the securitization of the oceanways and seaways that have in the recent years seen increased instances of piracy. Due to piracy, Indian cargo ships and personnel have suffered, making India vulnerable to threats. As over half of all global oil shipments go through the Malacca states annually, and as the region is very susceptible to piracy, and given India's sizable and capable navy, it has a major role to play to secure its own needs and broader energy security. India's regional successes have been limited. However, India's success rate is better in the various multilateral organizations. India's multilateral relations with countries around the world has gained tremendous momentum, and in the last decade, India has become a member of a wide array of multilateral bodies in economic and other spheres. India's participation is visible in a number of bodies such as G20, BRICS, IPSA, WTO, as well as with those like ASEAN, EAS, BIMSTEC, etc. Additionally, India has been invited to join major organizations as an observer state and as a member owing to its strong presence in international politics. In fact, India's participation in the various bodies in East Asia and Southeast Asia appears more nominal than substantive. India continues to be outside the APEC arrangement, having tried on numerous occasions to seek entry, but being denied on China's insistence. India's lookist or actist policy culminated in the facilitation of a political and security dialogue between India and East Asian nations. On security matters, India is getting increasingly integrated with the ASEAN Regional Forum to promote regional cooperation in matters like the maintenance of security of sea lanes of communication. India's goal has been stated as setting up a polycentric security order based on the need for a cooperative approach, especially considering the East Asian diversity. India's vision towards a multipolar world is reflected in its policies, programs and diplomacies undertaken, especially within regional organizations. India's lookist policy has been often considered a remarkably successful policy since its inception, given that India has been relatively successful in harnessing relations with countries like Japan, Singapore, Malaysia, Vietnam, etc. Subsequently, India's actist policy, launched in 2014 to serve the purpose of stronger trade and business ties with Southeast Asia and East Asia, with a focus on the northeast states of India. However, any analysis of India's lookist or actist policy would be incomplete without seriously considering China's role and its overwhelming presence in the region. China's footprints in the Southeast Asian region remain a hurdle to pursue India's endeavors through the policy. India has a nuclear power. Disarmament contributes to peace by removing conflicts among states. Military capabilities encourage war, bring insecurity and promote arms race that may culminate in a war. However, global disarmament seems to be difficult to achieve. Several states feel that they can ensure the security of their territory by obtaining nuclear technology. India opposes nuclear proliferation. India believes that real security is possible only through global disarmament and not by disarming the non-nuclear nations. Since the pursuit of global disarmament has become practically futile, India's object of nuclear policy has been targeted globally. The Chinese factor weighs greater than Pakistan in India's nuclear policy. The Sino-Indian War of 1962 made India and China adversaries. Later, a series of nuclear tests conducted by China since 1964 made India uncomfortable. China had increased its nuclear weapons and missile capabilities over the years. Since both India and China had battled in 1962, the nuclear threat from China looms large, with a possibility of India being blackmailed in future. Further, the relationship between China and Pakistan caused a sense of unease in India. India went for nuclear tests in 1974 and in 1998. India claimed a nuclear weapon state status. However, the major powers, including the United States, did not recognize it initially as a nuclear power. Later, India was seen by the rest of the world as a nuclear power. India felt that it could play a role in international affairs if it becomes a powerful and nuclear weapon state, because no one listens to a weak state and one can only influence from a position of power. Let us summarize what we have discussed in this lesson. Most of the countries recognize India as a global power. They also realize that India is a reliable partner and never acts as a hegemonic power. India is seen as a representative of global South. India advocates for multilateral engagements for stability, security, safety and prosperity. Evidently, India's overall growth has been posing threats to developed economies, so that they rather have ties with India than total non-engagement. I hope you understood the various factors that determine India's emergence as a global power. We have concluded our lesson on India emerging as a global power. Thank you.